Here's this woman who is 66 years old, unable and unwilling to go on a date, unable and unwilling to take day trips or vacations with her family. It's a very powerful statement.
You're okay. You're okay. Getting rid of one hurts bad. Because getting rid of all. It's making a difference.
You just can't imagine it.
I'm not ready to choose to send them away.
But you are choosing. You're choosing the birds over them. So right now, are you able to commit to getting the number down at all?
I'm not. I can't do it.
Okay.
It's not time.
I thought I loved my pets. That is a scene from Confessions: Animal Hoarding, a new series that's out. And Dr. Joti Samra, a clinical psychologist here in Vancouver and the president of the BC Psychological Association, as you saw, was in that particular episode and serves as an expert and consultant on the show as well. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we do hear stories about this from time to time. Here, I know that was in the U.S., but here in Canada, here in BC, of people with a house full of cats, it generally seems to be, or just a house full of animals that we don't really understand why they do it, and the animals, sometimes they're not well kept. These birds looked okay, but what is it that possesses someone to want to fill their homes with animals?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a complicated answer to that question. So certainly we've seen a lot of attention given to the whole issue of hoarding. And what we're normally used to kind of, or more familiar with seeing, is what's called object hoarding. So when people are collecting things. But we know a subset of hoarders gravitate mostly toward animals. And you're right, the cat lady is the stereotype.
The crazy cat lady,
and certainly we do know that cats are the most commonly hoarded animals. But as we saw in the clip, there are a range of different animals that people will hoard. So dogs, there's been exotic pets.
Do they hoard, because you talked about hoarding objects, are the reasons for hoarding objects different from what these people are doing? Like, do they hoard animals for some other reason?
Yeah, we do see some differences in terms of what the kind of people that gravitate toward animals. So if we step back for a minute and think about hoarding in general, we know there's a number of childhood and historical factors that make someone more likely to be someone who starts to hoard. And we know there are elevated rates of childhood trauma. So that includes sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. And when we look at individuals that are hoarding animals, and you kind of go back and look at their history and try and understand what led to them becoming so attached to animals, they often built this attachment at a very young age. So we're in very difficult circumstances, often had no one in terms of an adult role model that was there in terms of a support. And they really gravitated toward animals because they felt that they were getting unconditional love and support, and developed these really strong bonds. Now, anyone who's an animal lover can appreciate the kind of bond that you can end up getting from being with an animal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and most of the, I mean, all of the families that I've worked with, the hoarders, they, for the most part, had pretty functional lives at some point in their life. So,
well, this woman that we just saw, I mean, she's got a family. I assume that was her son who was sitting there listening to her talk. So what was it that possessed her to want to keep all of these parrots?
Well, these things didn't happen overnight. So this was a woman who did have quite a heavy history of trauma, ended up, you know, living a reasonably functional life. So was working, had been married, had children, raised her children, and then there were a number of circumstances in her life that started to happen that increased kind of stress levels for her and contributed to psychological symptoms. And for her at that point, she was pretty isolated, didn't have social supports in her life, and started to get this kind of really positively reinforcing relationship with birds. And it started with one, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so it started with one.
Right.
She found it very positive and started to gradually acquire more and more birds. And it was over the course of probably a decade that she got to the situation that she was in.
How bad did it get for her?
Things got really bad for her. I mean, she was in a situation where she's almost 70 years old and is working full-time. So she should be retired, working full-time at minimum wage to get money for bird food. So here's a woman who is physically not feeling well. She is unable to maintain conditions, or had been unable to maintain conditions in her home. So cleaning the bird cages, and I don't know if it was apparent from the clip, but there's actually bird droppings all through her home, bird dust, which has created respiratory problems for her. And her house became infested with rats underneath from the bird droppings.
And did she have relationships with humans?
Very minimal. So in her home, she had her bedroom where there was a bed, and she also was an object hoarder, so had a number of kind of, I mean, there was just kind of clutter and things everywhere. The only piece of furniture that was usable was her bed, where she slept about 3 hours a night, and one chair. So every part of her home, she had to get rid of. Sofa, couches, dining room table, every part of her kitchen. It was not an environment where people could come over, and she has a family. She has a son, a daughter-in-law, grandkids, and they're not able to come in the home. I mean, there's really safety concerns.
So what happened with her?
Well, she realized that she was at this point where she was getting overwhelmed. And certainly anyone that's getting to the point of getting involved in this kind of series is appreciating that there's some level of something not going right in their life, and that it needs to change. Her family was a really strong support. So we see her son and her daughter-in-law, and really they were able to communicate in a way that they never had to communicate how much they love for and care for their mom, the support that they're willing to give to her. And she ended up reducing her number by more than half.
Really? And she was okay?
And she was okay. It was very hard. I mean, it was highly emotional for her. Lots of defenses come up, right? And she really felt, as do most animal hoarders, that others don't understand the connection that they have to
you're
these
taking
animals.
away a piece of me. You're taking away who I am.
Well, absolutely. And these animals become a big part of a person's self-identity and really meaning and purpose in their life, right? So her whole day was structured around caretaking for these birds, and that was really positively reinforcing for her.
Well, I'm glad she managed to take the step towards getting rid of some of them, so hopefully she'll be able to live a healthier life down the road. And what an interesting show. I'd never even thought about people doing things like that. It's called Confessions, Animal Hoarding, with Dr. Joti Samra, clinical psychologist here in Vancouver. Thanks so much for coming in.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Great to talk to you.